Before the next sundown, Maren Bell could lose her wages, her bed, and her name, and Sela's pike meant to make the whole town watch. Every fork in the Bell house dining room stopped when Mrs. Dovey Bell shoved a covered basket toward her. "Take this to Vale Ranch now," Dovey said. "Refuse, and you do not sleep under my roof tonight." Maren looked at the men she had fed for months. Teamsters, drummers, freight hands, and boarders sat with beans cooling on their plates. Not one lifted his eyes. Sela's pike, whose credit held half the town by the throat, smiled beside the stove. His polished boots were crossed, and his watch chain shone against his vest as if time itself belonged to him. "Careful where you sit, Miss Bell," Pike said. "Gideon Vale's dead wife still owns the best chair in that house, and a woman returning with Vale property might easily be called a thief." Maren gripped the handle, unaware the proof Pike feared was already hidden beneath the basket lining. The room stirred with low laughter, but it had a nervous edge. Folks joked about Gideon Vale only when he was 6 miles away. He had once run the cleanest cattle outfit in Carbon County. Since his wife, Elise, died 2 winters before, he came to town only for nails, salt, and necessary business. He never stayed for church suppers. He never brought his hands into the Bell house. And he never let anybody speak long about the woman, whose apron still hung behind his kitchen door. Maren was 27, old enough to know when pity wore a clean collar. Dovey had hired her cheap after her father died owing board. Maren cooked, scrubbed, and took the blame for every burned biscuit served to men who never learned her name. If she refused this errand, Pike would enjoy watching Dovey put her out before morning. So Maren lifted the basket. "If Mr. Vale paid for supper," she said, "then he ought to get supper warm." Pike's smile sharpened. "Warm won't matter. That house has been cold since Elise left it." Maren walked out before her face could answer him. Behind her, no chair scraped back. No woman called her name. The boarding house door shut on heat, lamp smoke, and laughter that tried to sound harmless. Dovey waited until the door shut. Why send her there? Pike kept watching the road through the front window. "Because Vale opens his door for people the town has already shamed. If she finds paper, you call it stolen." Dovey went pale. "And if I refuse?" "Your flower stops tonight. Tomorrow your house follows his." The laughter resumed behind them. Dovey did not join it. Outside, dusk had turned the rail spur purple. Wind rolled dust along the street and rattled the paper notices nailed to the land office wall. Maren tucked the supper cloth tighter around the basket. Under the top towel sat beef hash, biscuits, apple preserves, and a small brown crock of coffee Dovey had nearly watered twice. She only knew the road to Vale Ranch ran west across open country, and the last orange light on the hills looked like fire about to go out. By the time Maren reached Vale Ranch, her arm ached from the basket and her skirts were gray to the knee. The ranch house stood square against the darkening pasture. It was not ruined, only unloved from a distance. The porch had been swept. The barn doors were shut true. A windmill creaked beside the tank. One lamp burned in the kitchen window. Maren climbed the steps and knocked. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then bootsteps crossed the floor. The door opened on a tall man in a faded blue shirt, sleeves rolled to the forearms. Gideon Vale had dark hair gone rough at the temples and a face whether had cut hard without making cruel. He looked first at the basket, then at Maren's dust-covered hem, then at the road behind her. "Bell House send you?" "Yes, sir, supper you paid for." "I paid for beef and bread, not for a woman to walk 6 miles after sundown." His voice was low, more tired than angry. Maren held out the basket because she did not know what else to do. "Mrs. Bell said food is food." Something passed through his eyes. He stepped back. "Come in before the coyotes start arguing over you." The kitchen was warmer than the porch. It smelled of coffee, pine ash, and emptiness kept clean. 2 plates sat in a cupboard with the doors open. One chair stood near the stove with a folded blue shawl across its back. Another chair faced the table from the far side, plain and unused. Maren, wanting to place the basket somewhere, moved toward the chair by the stove. Gideon crossed the room fast enough to make her stop. "Not there." Maren froze with the basket in both hands. His face changed before he spoke again. The sharpness left, and what remained was pain so old it had learned manners. "My wife once sat in that chair," he said. I don't ask the living to keep company with my dead." The words did not sound like a threat. That made them worse. They sounded like a door he had been holding shut with his whole body. Maren looked at the blue shawl. "I am sorry." "You didn't know?" "No." He took the basket from her carefully, as if the handle might have cut her palm. "Sit at the table if you want, or stand by the door if that feels safer. I won't keep you." That was the first kind thing anyone had said to her all day, and it was not soft. It had bones in it. Maren chose the chair farthest from the stove. Gideon noticed. He did not smile, but his shoulders eased by a small measure. He set out the food. He did not let her serve him like a hired girl. He took one plate and slid the other toward her. "You walked it here," he said. "You eat some." "Mrs. Bell didn't say I could." "Mrs. Bell isn't at my table." Maren should have refused. She should have thanked him, turned around, and started back before full dark. Instead, she sat with her hands in her lap while he poured coffee into 2 cups. The silence between them was not empty. It had the weight of the shawl, the road, and Pike's laughter. Maren took a biscuit because her stomach betrayed her with a sound she hoped he had not heard. Gideon heard. He looked down at his own plate and said nothing. That mercy nearly undid her. "Mr. Pike said you feed ghosts," she said, then wished she had bitten her tongue. Gideon's hand stopped over the coffee pot. "Pike says many things." "Most men do." He glanced at her then, and for the first time she saw something besides grief in his face. Not amusement exactly, recognition. "Does he trouble you at the Bell house?" "He troubles anyone who owes him." "Do you owe him?" "Mrs. Bell does, that is near enough." Gideon set the pot down. "Then I will hitch the buckboard and take you back when you are ready. If you would rather not go back tonight, there is a storeroom off the kitchen with a bolt inside. You can sleep there and ride in at sunup. Door stays yours, key stays yours." Maren stared at him. Men offered shelter in many ways. Some wrapped it in debt. Some wrapped it in claim. Gideon Vale offered it like a tool placed on a table, useful only if she chose to pick it up. "Why?" she asked. He looked at the blue shawl. "Because once, when my wife needed help, 3 rooms of people decided it was not their affair." Maren felt the sentence settle into the kitchen. She did not ask. He did not explain. The wind pushed at the window. A loose hinge clicked somewhere in the house. "Then I will take the ride back," she said. "Not because I mistrust you, because if I vanish overnight, Mr. Pike will write the story before morning." Gideon looked at her as if she had just said something sensible enough to hurt. "All right." He rose to get his coat. Maren stood too quickly and bumped the empty basket with her knee. The bottom lining, loosened by age and heat, lifted at one corner. A blackened scrap slid onto the floor. She bent and picked it up. It was a piece of paper, scorched along one side. The words were mostly gone, but a round purple stamp remained clear. Vale Mercantile. Paid. Beneath it, in a woman's small handwriting, were 3 letters, GV. Gideon saw it and went still. "Where did that come from?" "The basket lining." He took one step closer, then stopped himself. "May I see it?" Maren gave it to him. His fingers shook once before closing around the paper. "Elise used this basket," he said. "Before she died, she carried food to the North Pasture hands in it." "What is it?" His jaw tightened. Maybe nothing. Maybe the thing Silas Pike said never existed. "What happens if it cannot prove anything?" Gideon looked toward the dark window. "Tomorrow at sundown, Pike claims the South herd and the ranch title before the Rawlins buyer. If this scrap cannot speak by then, everything Elise paid for becomes his." If you enjoy clean, romantic Wild West stories about lonely ranchers, brave frontier women, and second chances at home, subscribe and ride along for the next tale. At the Bell house, Pike was not laughing now. He stood in the storeroom with Dovey Bell while she counted coffee tins she had already counted twice. The storeroom door was half shut. The dining room noise covered his voice, but not his meaning. "If the cook found anything in that basket," Pike said, "you keep your tongue ready." Dovey's face had gone pale under the kitchen heat. "Maren doesn't steal." "Maren eats because you let her. You keep this house because I let you buy flour on credit. Those are 2 facts you ought to love equally." What paper are you afraid of? Pike's eyes hardened. A widow's foolish receipt that has no lawful standing. Gideon Vale still owes on that note. Tomorrow's auction supper will prove it. His hands will hear it. The buyer from Rawlins will hear it. And if your cook starts waving burnt trash, she will be known as a thief before the hash cools. Dovey looked toward the dining room. No one came. She had spent years feeding men who would praise her pie and let her drown in debt. You promised not to take my house, she whispered. Then keep your girl quiet. By sunrise, Gideon had read the scrap a dozen times without making more sense of it. Maren had slept in the storeroom after all, with the bolt turned and the key under her palm. Gideon had left a folded blanket outside the door and walked away before she opened it. That small act did more to frighten her than any threat Pike had made. A cruel man was easy to understand. A careful one asked her to imagine a different life, and imagining was dangerous. In the morning, she found Gideon in the barn, brushing a bay horse with a white blaze. Mr. Vale. Gideon, he said, then seemed surprised he had offered it. Gideon, that receipt means something. Elise told me she paid Vale Mercantile the last installment on the ranch note before she took sick. Pike bought Vale's books after the old man died. He said there was no receipt. I called him a liar. He called me a widower who could not read his own grief. And the town believed him. The town owed him. Maren knew that country. Debt could put a hand over every mouth in a room. Why would Elise hide the receipt in a basket? She hid things where they would keep serving somebody, Gideon said. His voice softened on the word serving. Buttons in coffee tins, needle money in flour sacks. Once, $10 in a Bible because she said the preacher never opened it except Sundays. Maren smiled before she could stop herself. Gideon saw it. Something warmed in his face, brief as a match but real. Then the barn door darkened. Silas Pike stood there with two men behind him. Morning Vale, Miss Bell. He tipped his hat without respect. How generous of you to shelter hired help overnight. Folks in town are curious. Maren's spine stiffened. Gideon stepped between Pike and her without touching her. Say your business. Auction supper at your yard tonight. You signed the notice. Under protest. Debt doesn't mind protest. Pike looked past him. Mrs. Bell says her cook misplaced herself and perhaps other things. Maren felt heat rise in her face. Mrs. Bell said that. She will when asked properly. Gideon's hand tightened on the brush. You threaten women because men with land know you too well. Pike smiled. I collect notes because men with land forget to pay them. Tonight, your hands will know who owns the beef they eat. The Rawlins buyer will know who signs the sale, and Miss Bell will know whether she wants a roof or a theft charge. He turned and left with his men. Maren let out a breath, only after hoofbeats moved away. Go back to town, Gideon said. No. Maren. Her name in his mouth struck harder than it should have. He said it like he had been careful not to use it until care became impossible. If I go, she said, he uses me anyway. If I stay, maybe we make him speak where others can hear. You owe me nothing. I know that is why I can choose. Gideon turned from her, looking at the horse, the dust, anything but her face. If I ask you to stay, he said quietly, it won't be because I need a cook. The barn seemed to hold its breath. Maren's fingers curled around the basket handle. Then don't ask yet. Let me earn the supper first. By noon, Mrs. Dovey Bell had fired Maren in front of the wash line. Maren had come back only for her small carpet bag, her good apron, and the wages Dovey still owed her. Dovey met her in the yard with Pike standing by the hitching rail. Two laundry girls watched from behind a sheet. The drummer from Cheyenne pretended to study his sample case. I cannot keep a girl who sleeps at a man's ranch and brings back trouble, Dovey said. Her voice shook. Maren heard it, but hurt did not become less sharp because fear held the knife. Say what you mean, Maren said. Pike stepped forward. She means you stole paper from Gideon Vale and aimed to use it against lawful debt. The laundry girls stared. The drummer shut his case. Maren could have shown the receipt then. She nearly did. But Pike wanted the paper in town, away from Gideon's hands, away from the ranch crew, away from anyone who had seen Vale Mercantile's old stamp used in life. If she revealed it now, he would snatch it with a smile and call it nothing. So she swallowed humiliation like bitter coffee. "I stole nothing." Dovey looked at her with pleading eyes. "Maren, don't make this worse." "You already did." The words hurt Dovey. Maren was glad for 1 second and ashamed the next. She held out her hand. "My wages." Dovey reached for her apron pocket, but Pike caught her wrist. "Against the trouble she caused," he said. "Bell House will hold them until we know what else she carried off." No one moved. The laundry girls looked at the sheet. The drummer looked at the dirt. Maren felt the last honest money she had earned become another thing Pike could touch. She picked up her carpetbag and walked back toward the road. Pike called after her, "Auction supper starts at sundown. Bring your basket, Miss Bell. Thieves should learn to return what they carry." Maren did not turn. At Vale Ranch, Gideon's hands had gathered in the barn. There were 5 of them. Tom Rusk, with a limp from a bronc fall, young Abel Kit, who sent half his wages to a mother in Laramie, Louis Ortega, who had ridden with Gideon since before Elise died, and 2 brothers named Shaw, who trusted money more than speeches. They did not like Pike. They liked unpaid wages less. Before Gideon could speak, hammer blows cracked from the yard. Abel ran to the open barn door. "Pike's man is nailing something over the brand board." The hands stepped outside. A fresh red notice had been driven across the Vale mark on the gatepost. "South herd transfers at sundown. Ranch title to follow sale authority." One Shaw brother read it under his breath and cursed. "If Pike takes the note," Tom said, "he takes the herd sale. If he takes the herd sale, we ride out empty." Gideon stood near the stall gate. "I know." "Then give him the north pasture and keep the house," one Shaw brother said. "No shame in keeping what you can." "There is shame in letting a liar choose what a dead woman paid for." Louis looked at Maren's basket. "You sure that paper is enough?" Maren answered before Gideon could. "No, a burned paper alone is never enough when the man against it owns half the flour in town. But Mr. Vale had a clerk, didn't he? Someone stamped receipts with him." Gideon looked at her. "Simon Vale's nephew, Andrew. He drives a meat wagon now. Pike invited him tonight to look respectable." "Then Pike must say the note is unpaid in front of Andrew Vale," Maren said. "And Andrew must see the stamp before Pike can call it forged." Abel shifted, "And if Andrew won't cross Pike?" Maren thought of Dovey's pale face. "Then we feed him first. Hungry men fear rich men. Fed men sometimes remember they have a spine." A surprised laugh broke from Tom Rusk. Even Gideon's mouth moved, almost a smile. Then he took the bay horse's bridle from its peg and laid it across a barrel. "My saddle horse stands bond for tonight's wages," he said. "If this fails and Pike takes the sale, Tom sells him in town and pays you first." The men went quiet. Tom touched the bridle like it hurt him. "That horse is worth 6 months of our wages and the last fast mount on this place." Maren understood what Gideon had done. He had not risked a feeling. He had risked the last fine horse on a ranch built by horses. "Gideon," she said softly. He did not look away from the men. "No woman gets ruined at my table while I keep a horse worth selling." By sundown, lanterns hung from the cottonwood poles in the Vale yard. Pike had wanted the supper outside so everyone could see Gideon humbled before the sale papers. Maren let him have the yard. A kitchen could hold secrets. A yard made witnesses. She cooked beef hash in the biggest iron pan, sliced biscuits, and set coffee on a plank table. Gideon carried benches out himself. Pike arrived with Dovey, the Rawlins buyer, Andrew Vale, and nearly every man who owed him enough to fear missing a public meal. Pike paused when he saw Maren behind the serving table. "Bold," he said. "Hungry men are poor listeners," Maren answered. "I thought you wanted them fed before you spoke." Gideon heard and glanced at her. The look was small, but it steadied her more than praise. The empty chair came out last. Pike ordered one of his men to set it near the head of the table. The blue shawl was gone, but everyone who knew Vale Ranch knew that chair. A murmur ran through the crowd. Gideon's face hardened. Pike lifted his voice. Since Mrs. Vale's good management is the question tonight, perhaps her chair should witness how badly her husband kept accounts. Maren saw Gideon's hands close. She stepped forward before he moved. No. Every head turned. Pike's eyebrows rose. No. That chair is not yours to use. And you speak for Vale Ranch now. Maren felt the old fear reach for her throat. A cook did not speak in yards full of men. A fired cook did not correct a creditor. A woman with no table did not defend another woman's chair. But Gideon had offered her a key and a road. He had risked his horse. He had said if he asked her to stay, it would not be because he needed a cook. So Maren kept her voice clear. I speak for supper, she said, and I won't serve a man who mocks the dead before he eats from their table. The yard went still. Tom Rusk stood first. He picked up the chair and carried it to the porch wall out of Pike's reach. Lewis moved to stand beside him. Abel followed, pale but determined. Pike's smile disappeared. Vale, he snapped, control your help. Gideon stepped to Maren's side. She is not my help unless she chooses wages from me. She is not yours at all. The Rollins buyer watched with open interest. Andrew Vale stared at his plate. Maren served supper. She gave Andrew the first full helping after Gideon, not because he deserved kindness more than others, but because his hands shook when Pike looked at him. Men who shook needed something solid to hold. Only when plates were filled and coffee poured did Pike pull the folded note from his coat. Gideon Vale owes $1,200 secured against the South Herd and Ranch title, he declared. Payment never entered Vale Mercantile's book. By right of purchase, I claim sale authority tonight. Maren wiped her hands on her apron. Say that again, she said. Pike turned slowly. What? Say payment never entered Vale Mercantile's book. Say it while Mr. Andrew Vale is listening. Andrew flinched. Pike's voice cooled. Payment never entered the book. And no receipt was stamped paid. None lawful. Maren reached into the basket and took out the scorched stub, wrapped in a clean napkin. Pike moved so fast his chair scraped dirt. That is stolen property. Gideon caught Pike's wrist before he reached her. He did not twist it. He only held it, and every man in the yard saw Pike fail to move him. Let her speak, Gideon said. Maren laid the stub on the table before Andrew Vale. Is that your uncle's stamp? Andrew did not touch it at first. Pike stared at him with all the weight of every credit account in town. Dovey stood behind Pike, white-faced. Andrew, Maren said, gentler now, I fed you because hungry men fear rich men. You are not hungry now. Is that your uncle's stamp? Andrew looked at the purple circle, then at Gideon. Yes, he whispered. Pike laughed once. A stamp proves nothing. Any clerk could stamp trash. Andrew lifted his head. Not that one. The crack through the L happened the month before Uncle Simon died. We used it on paid ranch notes only until the new stamp came from Cheyenne. I stamped 3 myself. This was 1. Mrs. Vale paid in gold and 2 bank drafts. The yard changed. It was not loud. It was worse for Pike because it was quiet. Men looked from the note to the receipt, then to the woman who had carried it hidden in a supper basket. Maren pulled a clean sale bill from beside the coffee pot and set a pencil next to Andrew's hand. Write that before fear talks you out of it, she said. Andrew's mouth worked once. Then he bent over the bill and wrote with shaking fingers. He signed his name beneath the statement and pushed it into the lantern light. One Shaw brother pushed Pike's untouched coffee away. I told Gideon to surrender the north pasture. I was wrong. Tom Rusk turned his chair until his back faced Pike. Pike made his last try. He shoved Dovey forward with a hand at her elbow. Tell them, he said. Tell them your cook came back with that paper after sleeping in his house. Tell them she stole whatever he told her to steal. Dovey's mouth opened. Maren braced herself. Then Dovey looked at the chair against the porch wall. Perhaps she saw Elise Vale there. Perhaps she saw herself. Perhaps she only saw the end of being owned by flour sacks and fear. No, Dovey said. Pike's hand tightened. Dovey. She pulled free. No, Maren did not steal. I sent her with the basket because you told me to shame her and stir Gideon. You said if the receipt showed, I was to call her thief. Pike's face darkened. You fool. The Rollins buyer folded his sale papers. Then he drew the freight route agreement from his case and tore it through the blank signature line. No herd, no route, he said. I don't buy herds with bad notes under them. Tom Rusk pushed Pike's note across the table with 2 fingers, as if it smelled rotten. Looks like your paper is hungry, Tom said. Fed itself too many lies. Pike reached for the note, but Gideon took it first and laid it beside the receipt and Andrew's statement. He looked at Maren. Your proof, he said, your choice. That mattered. In front of everyone, he did not seize the victory from her hand. Maren picked up the note. This paper used a dead woman's silence and a living woman's shame. It does not get to sit whole at this table. She tore it across the signature. Then she tore it again. Gideon opened the stove door from the outdoor cook fire, and Maren dropped the pieces onto the coals. Pike watched his claim curl black. His men did not move to defend him. The buyer stepped away. Andrew's signed statement lay beside the scorched receipt. Dovey stood alone, crying without being comforted because apology had to wait its turn behind consequence. Gideon faced the yard. Mrs. Bell loses the Vale supper contract for 1 month. Maren Bell holds it at fair wages if she wants it. Maren raised a hand before he could continue. And my Bell house wages come first, she said. Every dollar held today. Then Dovey works the branding meals without profit until the credit she used to silence me is marked down. Dovey nodded. She had lost face in front of the same people she had tried to impress. It was not ruin, it was cost. Pike backed toward his horse. Bring my horse, he snapped at his 2 men. Neither man moved. One finally looked at the hitching rail and said, You know where you tied it. Luis Ortega stepped into Pike's path long enough to make him stop. Road west goes past men you tried not to pay. Choose the east road. Pike looked around for obedience and found none. That was his visible fall, not a jail cell, not a gunfight. Something worse for a man like him. His money no longer moved men's feet. He mounted and rode east with no buyer, no note, no route, and no crowd willing to repeat his story. The yard did not cheer. Some endings were too serious for noise. Gideon stood beside Maren while the note burned down. When it was ash, he took the receipt stub and handed it back to her. Elise hid it where it would keep serving somebody, he said. Maren held it carefully, then it did. The month that followed did not turn grief into a song. It turned it into work. Maren cooked for Vale Ranch 3 days a week and slept in the storeroom when weather held her over, bolt inside, key in her apron pocket. Dovey came twice to help with branding meals, red-eyed and quiet, and Maren let her wash pans without pretending the hurt had vanished. The Bell house wages came in full, counted into Maren's hand where the same laundry girls could see. Gideon did not court Maren in secret. That was his second proof of safety. He waited until her wages were counted in her own hand. He waited until the town knew Pike's note was ash. He waited until Maren had enough money tucked in a coffee tin to leave if leaving became the right thing. Only then did he ask her to stay for supper after the hands rode out. The kitchen looked different with the evening sun in it. The blue shawl no longer hung on the chair. Gideon had folded it in a cedar box with Elise's letters after reading one aloud to Maren on the porch. It had been a letter about planting beans too early and scolding him for burning coffee. Maren had laughed, and Gideon had cried without hiding his face. Now the chair stood near the stove again, but not alone. Gideon took it by the back and dragged it slowly across the floor until it rested beside his own place at the table. Maren watched him, unable to speak. I was wrong that first night, he said. Not about grief. A man should not ask a living woman to sit inside a dead woman's shadow. But I was wrong to think that chair had only one meaning left. He pulled out the chair for her, then stepped back. Come sit beside me, Maren, not in her place, in yours. Her eyes filled, but she smiled through it. Is that a supper invitation or a courtship question? For the first time since she had known him, Gideon Vale smiled fully. It changed his face so much that she saw the young husband he had been and the living man he still was. Both, if you will allow it. I would like to court you proper, not because this house needs a cook, not because grief needs a cover, because when you are at my table, I remember that the living are still allowed to be hungry. Maren sat down. She did it slowly with both hands free, the door unlocked behind her, her wages in her pocket, and the road to town still open if she wanted it. Then she reached across the table and took his hand. "You may court me Gideon Vale," she said, "but if you burn the coffee, I will quote your wife." He laughed, and the sound filled the kitchen without driving Elise out of it. That was the wonder. Love did not erase the old chair. It made room beside it. Above the kitchen table, Gideon hung Elise's scorched receipt beside Maren's new supper contract in one pine frame. Below it, the chair Pike had dragged into the yard to shame the dead now stood beside Gideon's, set with 2 cups for morning. Not in Elise's place, but in the place Maren had chosen and earned. The first time Maren entered that room, silence warned her an insult was coming. Now Gideon pulled out her chair, and no one had the power to take her place, her wages, or her name.